Hey everybody, Assalamu alaikum. Hope you're having a wonderful day. Make sure that you hit the subscribe button and the notify button so you know when you're getting new episodes. And we just want to grow this project. I thank you in advance. Without further ado, let's get it rolling. The Shout Out Show. Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. I'm Preacher Miles, host of the SOS The Shout Out Show. Welcome to our platform. I hope you're having an exceptional Sunday, wherever you are. And even if you're already into your Monday, we hope that you're off to a good start of the week. Brothers and sisters, we always say house business. If you're coming to the show for the first time, we want to welcome you. That's number one. We also ask that you click the subscribe and like button if you're watching YouTube. The other thing also is that we want you to have a quality experience. So if you're coming, we want to make sure that we give you a good enough show that gives you a compelling reason to come back. And don't just come back, tell your friends and bring them back as well. It's number one. Number two, I always got to show the love and give out the respect for all the people that have been supporting the SOS from day one. When I say day one, it's not really day one, but I'm just talking about over a period of time. I want to thank all those people too. A lot of effort goes into having a platform, particularly going 7 days a week, not missing a day since April the 24th. And it comes from a certain place. It doesn't really come from me. It comes from the idea that there are people out there that may want to hear information that I'm sharing, not information that I own, information I'm sharing. As my coach used to say, the information is free. What you want to do with it, that's up to you. But for right now, the information is free. So I'm going to shout out our quick folk right here. We got Sister Ree. Ree, I hope everything's going well around the corner. And Sister Sultana, who is our consultant producer. Without Sister Sultana, this show does not bounce off. I'm going to tell y'all that right now. Now, yesterday, first of all, I just want to give a shout out for yesterday's guest, Sister Aisha Mustafa, the editor of the Muslim Journal. She came through yesterday, brothers and sisters, and I mean, she dropped gems in terms of, and I want everybody to remember this. This is a female editor of a newspaper, a black female editor of a newspaper, and she just dropped science. She dropped so much stuff. It's like I literally, when somebody's giving you stuff and you've never heard it before, you have nothing to compare it to. It was that kind of exhilaration. Hearing her give stuff and she was just so humble, amazingly humble. So I decided today for our Sunday potluck, I want to go away from the Donald Trump. I want to go away from COVID. And I want to talk about a certain type of pressure that all of us are dealing with. But more importantly, how we deal with that pressure. So I'm going to give you two scenarios. The first scenario was several years ago. I got a call that I can't say he was a family member, but he was a hero. I only met him once, but I felt like I knew the guy my whole life. His name was Muhammad Ali. And I had flown into Louisville to be a part of his janazah, his funeral. And there we were. People from around the world came to pay homage. They paid their last respects to Muhammad Ali. And a conversation broke out. The conversation broke out about what Muhammad Ali meant to everybody. And like I said, everybody had a story about Muhammad Ali. And it was a guy that walked up and he showed a picture of himself and Muhammad Ali from years ago. And this guy, he wasn't rich. He wasn't from the United States. But his crowning moment in life is that he got to spend time with Muhammad Ali. And I'm saying Muhammad Ali at this point in time, this is for the illness. This is Muhammad Ali that's bigger than life. And it hit everybody as we listened to this person who told us about his travels to get to the United States. Because he wasn't a wealthy man. his travels to get to the United States. He was a modest man. He didn't really have money. But in his heart, the profundity of how Muhammad Ali addressed him, treated him, it laid bare what we were thinking about, what we were losing with Muhammad Ali's passing. And I have to frame this. We were losing him physically, but he left us something that was amazing. And the guy who basically he probably spent a whole year's savings just to get to Louisville to pay his respects. He said Muhammad Ali reminded him in his deep, darkest moments of poverty, poor education. He said, whatever it is, Muhammad Ali reminded him that you always have to be wary of grace. And we sat back going, that's what we're missing. We've lost Muhammad Ali, but we've lost a constant reminder of grace. If you go back and watch the old videos of Muhammad Ali, when he was sick, he was a humble man. He never, boo-hooed himself. He never gave a pity party. And because of that, and his speech was limited, very limited, but because of that, we got to watch the metaphysical understanding of grace. And I want to talk about that today because that's what's missing today. There's a lot of, my first, okay, I'm going to tell you, my first interaction with grace is when your mama go, you better say the grace. And you would say the grace, dear Lord, bless us for the food and da-da-da. And you're just going through it as a kid. You don't understand that your mother and father have to get out in that street and hustle for you to get food. All you know about when you're young is eating, right? You take a shower, that water's supposed to be there, electricity's supposed to be on. We don't know anything about that. That grace is something that you grow into and you begin to appreciate because you look at the situations around you. You look at the situation around you and you place values on the things that are going around and how you are understanding that you're going to interact with them. Grace has different connotations. Like in Eastern religions, grace is defined as really senses. The, sight, sound, smell, touch, all these things. And it says that grace allows you to engage, if you will, creation. In a Muslim religion, it's interesting because grace is defined as something that, for lack of a better word, and I don't want to be paraphrasing it too much, but grace is defined as something that is two things. Number one, undeserved, and number two, free. Undeserved and free. This hadith, I don't know the exact hadith. Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, says that I'm paraphrasing, even him for all of his good deeds could not get into paradise without what? Without what? The mercy and grace of God. And as we look around, Martin Luther King framed this very, very poignantly in his last speech. His last speech. And I've been to the mountaintop, that type of deal, that space, but you have to listen to that, maybe that 8-9 minutes before then. And he talks about accepting the position that God has put him in. He frames it like he's a dream, like God takes him all through the history of the world and he stops. He says, where do you want to be? And he goes, where I am right now is where I'm supposed to be. That's grace. That is unrequited grace. And as we begin to look around, it is the absence of grace that's even led to this conversation that we're having on Sunday Potluck. That we don't stop and recognize the things that are given to us. We don't deserve them. The things that are given to us, they're given and they're free. In the Christian tradition, grace is conferred upon God's children. Why? Because Jesus took the hit. And that's why you get his grace. Now, there's all different types of understanding. There's all different types of levels of interpretation about grace. But the one thing I understood about grace in my own life, and I've just seen it play out in my family's life, my friends' life, family life, community life, is that it can never be owned. Grace can never be owned. It can be accepted, but it can't be owned. Like, we don't naturally emote grace. We don't naturally emote mercy because you need examples of how to do that. The scope of grace is allowing agency to, in many regards, be vulnerable, but not be vulnerable for the people, the situations, or material things. It is to be vulnerable to understand that in that pursuit of grace, you can get more grace. In that pursuit of grace, you can get more mercy. In that pursuit of grace, you can get more understanding about who you are. The thing that's sad right now is we have a referendum that's going on in society, which literally, Cornel West said this, and I'll find a quote, maybe another show, but Cornel West basically said that Dr. King framed this thing that if we don't pivot, America, as we know it, can only go one or two places. Forward, it would go to hell. Forward, or it can go to hell. We are in a situation where when I wake up in the world, it's not the crime that I worry about. It's not the crime. The murders bother me. Police brutality bother me. But it's in the actions of these things, the actions of social justice, the actions of police brutality, that the absence of grace, if you will, the absence of grace, if you will, is the thing that troubles me. Because now people have accepted the idea that grace, unfortunately, just like mercy, comes from them. I decide who I'm going to be merciful with. I decide who I'm going to give grace to. But you can't, because you don't own neither mercy or grace. But we have a society now. We have a mindset that's almost representative of the slave trade. It's almost representative of the colonization of African nations. It's almost representative of colonization of Muslim nations. That people have framed a paradigm whereby oppression now comes with compartmentalized what they think is grace. And as you further begin to get into it, it's an amazing type of thing. Because I've never ever really thought about a world that didn't have grace. I never really thought about a world that didn't have mercy or merciful people until now. When I say now, we do use words like privilege, as Sister Sultana has added. We do use words like privilege, but we won't use the word that person has no grace. You know, back in the day, one of the best words you can have is this, a person carries himself with a certain amount of grace, which means they had a certain amount of dignity about themselves. And the best part about that is that grace and that dignity was a communal aspiration. We all wanted to have grace. We all wanted to be like that person in the neighborhood who, despite everything that went on, you can count on them having mercy, having grace, having a connection to etiquette, having a connection to empathy, having a connection to understanding and evolving that as an idea to the community. What we have now is, and I don't want to harp on it, but the absence of grace after Muhammad Ali has been a devolution into toxicity. We now, in the absence of grace, we have toxicity. And when I say toxicity, I mean that it is a poison that begets another poison. It's a poison where there's no antidote. It's just more poison. And that poison populates our society. And this is important because now we have generations that are coming up not understanding the importance of grace, the importance of clarity. I was watching a TV show recently, and the mother put all the food out on the table and and the kids came downstairs and they just started eating. And I was shocked, like, what are these kids doing? They're just eating. One kid took the food and headed out the door. And I understand people got to go, they're on the run, but nobody said stop. let's say grace. Now you know I almost lost my life one time. My mom said say grace, and I did the quick one. Uh, what was it? Not thank you Lord for the food about to receive. I said, good bread, good meat, good Lord, let's eat. All right. And the coma didn't last that long. But my point is, it was an emphasis on understanding that the food there didn't necessarily have to be there. That my mother and my father didn't necessarily come by this food by their own intuition. You can make money, but you can still be poor, right? You could be a millionaire, but you can still be poor. You're a millionaire on paper, but in terms of physical paper, you're poor. And that idea, if you will, framed for me as I stood there making dua for Muhammad Ali, that whatever situation comes, we, conscious people, can never, ever, ever, ever lose grace. I think of the people who were killed by Dylan Roof in South Carolina. African American people, black folk. And here was a young man who came in, I want to say, experienced their grace. They didn't kick him out. They didn't say, hey, white boy, what you doing in here? They didn't check him for weapons. They were in a house of worship. They were in a place of worship where the idea of grace is exponential in that space. They were praying, seeking deliverance, seeking guidance, seeking enlightenment. They all lost their lives. And understandably, a lot of us were hot. A lot of us were hot. One brother said, why didn't they do something? And I said, brother, maybe the reason they do something because they were connected. You know what I'm saying? They were connected. If it was their time to go home to God, to go home to Allah, it was their time to go home to Allah. But in that moment, how high, how intense, how imaginatively beautiful was that space of grace? I'm saying it was so blinding to this young man that he couldn't handle it, that he destroyed lives. He took lives because the space, the grace in that place was so pure, so robust, he couldn't handle it. In history, African Americans in particular, people of faith in particular, have become targets, if you will, because they embody grace. You see, the beautiful part of the civil rights movement was this. The beautiful part of it was, you can knock me down, you can turn on water hoses, you can stick dogs on me, but we're going to carry ourselves with grace. And the more you attack us, the greater our grace looks. The more you assault us, the bigger our grace looks. It's my understanding and my own personal opinion that from the 60s, the idea and the I want to say the philosophical understanding of African American life in America expanded. Thus, nobody can do what we do. Nobody. With religion, with art, nobody can do, because that level of grace is amazing. Muhammad Ali went from being a man who was hated because he joined the Nation of Islam to a man that by his death, the entire world comes to take part in, even as he lie in state, take part in his grace. Which moves me to this point. Maybe the argument we need to be having now, as we start about voting and maybe the thing we need to start talking about is how to restore our own grace. Like, you know, people can't give you grace. You got to have a conversation with God. You got to have a conversation with Allah. You got to have a conversation with Buddha. You have to have a conversation about What is it that expands me beyond all of this chaos? And it is grace. Martin Luther King, grace. Malcolm X, grace. Medgar Evers, grace. Nelson Mandela, grace. Fannie Lou Hamer, grace. I can keep going on, grace. Musicians, John Coltrane, grace. Thelonious Monk, grace. I can keep going on. Let me shout out my mom. Y'all keep my mom in your prayers. She's a little under the weather. Love you, Mom. Thanks for coming on the show. And I'm glad she came over because my mom taught me grace. In fact, through all this stuff, COVID and Trump and da-da-da, it's important because grace allows you not to lose who you are. It allows you to focus on who you are. Grace is one of the few innovations, the few options in life and religious life whereby you can stop and create your own safe space just with grace. And you can pick and choose who comes into that space because there's a criteria. You see what I'm saying? There's a criteria. See, to have grace needs to understand where it comes from. I love the Islamic interpretation of grace, which is basically you can do everything you want to. However, if you don't have the grace and mercy from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you won't get into paradise. It doesn't mean anything. How do you teach grace? By example. By example. You teach grace by example. I've told you guys about teachers who I didn't like, Miss Jones, my 6th grade teacher, da-da-da. I said all that stuff, and she was a tough teacher, but let me tell you something. That strong Black woman had grace. And that came with the respect. That came with understanding. And grace is not something that you are, it just comes. We don't even talk about it. We don't talk about it, which is 100. I think it's beautiful. We don't even talk about it. This is my partner, Doug. Hey, man, Doug, it's just what we do. So, all right, there you go. But let me throw this out here. One of the larger features that I've experienced as a comedian, with Allah Made Me Funny and going all over the world, was it opened me up to something that my teacher, Imam Worthy Muhammad, didn't really tell me about. He said, you're going to have to go meet people where they are. So it was my exposure to the immigrant community here in the United States and around the world. And what he didn't tell me was this. He said that as you go through life and you try to live a graceful life, people will find you. People who are trying to live graceful lives will find you. And that was the beauty of comedy, if you will. That, yes, I was telling jokes, but there was grace in what we talked about. So at the end of the show, it mattered that when children wanted to shake your hand or get an autograph or take a picture, it was no question. It was about you have to show that to the children, and it has to be free of cost. Like I said, my understanding of grace is, number one, we don't deserve it. Number two, it's free. Can you understand that? That you don't deserve it, but it's free. There's nothing in life that you're going to get like that. Very little in life that you're going to get that. And so as I close today, because I don't want to be long-winded, but I can tell you, pretty much everyone here in the chat has shown me grace. Be it a kind word, being helping me out when I didn't know how to do something, being assisting me when I was unorganized, my mother, pat me on the head when it wasn't going well, my father with an encouraging word, my own family saying, hey, look, we're fighters. It didn't happen for you this time, but it'll happen next time. Do you understand the power of that? And as I close, one of my greatest victories is not my victory. One of my greatest victory beyond comedy, because comedy is not really a victory. It was being able to show grace to children who had not experienced grace in the way they should have. Being able to sit with children who are underprivileged, misunderstood, misrepresented, and talk to them that they were, I want to say, fulfilled. They were willing, they were worthy, if you will, of grace. And learning that through a very, very difficult process, but being able to put it in perspective to a child and understand that a child that grows up with grace, a child that understands mercy, is an adult that can be successful and contribute to the overall success of our community. Brothers and sisters, I have to go. You guys have been amazing. And whatever it is you're going through, COVID, job issues, family issues, marriages, Donald Trump acting crazy, the antidote is that you treat yourself and the people around you, despite what's going on, with grace. And in that way, you'll continue to get grace. And that's currency. That's my show. I'm Preacher Moss. God bless you guys. Have an amazing Sunday. See you tomorrow. Stay blessed, everyone. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Notify button, and I'll see you again on this side of the microphone. You probably wonder what that smell is. That's me. I smell good. And the reason I smell good is because I use oils from Tarif Altar. So I'm not saying you can't smell good. I'm not even saying you stink. I'm saying you have the opportunity to smell exquisite. Check out TarifAltar.com for some of the best oils and scents in town.